Shang Junlin reached out and touched it gently. I feel your kindness, Xin Yu. No. How did she feel my feelings? Your Majesty, you don't have to be embarrassed. I already know your feelings for me. Shang Junlin suddenly realized that it was the secret information from the hidden dragon guards. He changed the topic. I will listen to you on this matter. Until he returned to Yuzhong Palace, Xin Yu still didn't understand why Shang Junlin's attitude was so strange. Because of this matter, Xin Yu forgot to ask Shang Junlin about the return of the vassal kings. Forget it. I will ask next time. Xin Yu murmured. Your Majesty, this is the revised schedule of the banquet. Please take a look. Xin Yu took it and looked through it carefully. He said, tell them to follow the arrangement. Yes. After the servant left, Xin Yu stood by the window and looked into the distance. Yuzhong Palace was not far from the emperor's bedroom. He didn't know what the original designer of Yuzhong Palace was thinking. From where Shan Yu was standing now, he could see the corner of the emperor's bedroom. He couldn't see the specific figure, but it was enough to remind him of the person. After standing for a while, Shan Yu felt a little cold. He walked back to the table and sat down. In his previous life, Shun Qingran was not conferred the title of emperor when he entered the palace. He also didn't participate in the banquet. Xin Yu didn't participate in the banquet, so he didn't know what happened at the banquet. The process of the banquet was complicated. Fortunately, Shun Yu had similar experience in his previous life. He also had the help of people who were familiar with the process. It was quite easy for him to handle it. With the arrival of the emperor's birthday, the news that Feng Jun announced became more and more shocking. This time, with the emperor's permission, the news was not deliberately hidden. The people and the officials almost received the news at the same time. Just like when the officials first received the news, everyone's first reaction was disbelief. Censor Zhang was used to maintaining his reputation. The people in the capital had a good impression of him. Suddenly, they found out that he had done so many things behind the scenes. They were unwilling to believe it. However, the evidence given by the imperial court was too sufficient. The shocking facts were in front of them. They had no choice but to believe it. So, Censor Zhang was arrested not because he angered that person, but because his crimes were unforgivable? But, if that's the case, why didn't they announce his crimes from the beginning? That person must have a reason for doing so. Think about it. After Censor Zhang was imprisoned, didn't they catch a few more of his accomplices? Yes, it's all thanks to His Majesty's wisdom and martial prowess. He had anticipated that someone would break into the prison and set up an inescapable net to catch those people. Mu Shi brought the warm medicine. Before Imperial Physician Gu left, he prepared the herbs that young master needed and also left a token. If young master needs it, you can go to him at any time. Why? Xin Yu remembered that some time ago, Mu Shi was frightened by Shang Junlin, so he deliberately gave her a leave. Imperial Physician Gu didn't come to Yuzhong Palace after that. It must have happened during that time. Mu Shi's words also confirmed his guess. It's my fault. I wanted to find time to tell young master, but these days, for some reason, His Majesty came to Yuzhong Palace whenever he was free. Mu Shi was afraid that it would be like last time, so she didn't find a chance to tell Xin Yu. It's okay. Did Imperial Physician Gu say where to find him? A pharmacy on West Street in the capital. Xin Yu's understanding of Imperial Physician Gu came from that person in his previous life. He didn't even know the specific time when Imperial Physician Gu was punished. He asked Mu Shi because he was worried that Imperial Physician Gu suffered the same thing as in his previous life when he didn't know. Little did he know that Imperial Physician Gu was also afraid at this time. In a secluded courtyard, a young man in black was practicing swordsmanship. The young man in light blue clothes looked at the young man in the courtyard with a gentle gaze and felt very lucky. When the young man noticed Imperial Physician Gu, he put away his sword and ran over. Imperial Physician Gu touched the young man's sweaty hair and said, I have to go back to work tomorrow. You stay at home and don't cause trouble. Are you going to take care of that Guejun again? The young man curled his lips. Don't be rude. Guejun is my benefactor. You should respect him. Knowing that this child was stubborn, Imperial Physician Gu told him what had happened these days. I didn't know you encountered such a dangerous situation. The young man was scared after listening. He hugged the young man's waist and said in a muffled voice, Shun Guijun is my benefactor from now on. In a place where Imperial physician Gu couldn't see, Gu Huai's eyes were dark. At noon, the Imperial chef in the palace made new snacks. The white pastries were decorated with bright plum blossoms. The fragrance was sweet, but not greasy. Xinyu couldn't help but eat a little more. He was a little full, so he walked outside to digest. When Shang Junlin came, he saw Shun Yu's lazy appearance. He walked over and hugged Xinyu. Xinyu leaned on him and helped him walk. Shang Junlin said, "If you're tired, go in and rest." Xinyu shook his head. "I'm digesting. I'm a little full." Shun was wondering what happened to you. Shang Junlin's eyes had a hint of a smile. "Why are you still full?" "It's because the new imperial chef sent by your majesty made delicious snacks." Xinyu pretended to complain. "Then Zhun should transfer him away?" Shang Junlin lowered his head and approached. "No, it's mine now." Xinyu hurriedly turned his head, and his voice suddenly disappeared. His lips just happened to touch Shang Junlin's sharp jawline. Genius 1 second. Remember this website. www.bq50cc Literature Mobile Version Website. mbq50cc. Chapter 14. Strange emotions spread in the air. Xinyu forgot to move for a moment and maintained the posture of half leaning on Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin didn't know what to think, but he didn't push him away at first. In the end, Xinyu came back to his senses first and hurriedly retreated. "Be careful." The road was slippery on a snowy day. Xinyu retreated too quickly and almost slipped. Shang Junlin was quick to help him up. Xinyu's emotions fluctuated too much. After calming down for a while, he saw the man's arm firmly supporting him. He lowered his eyes awkwardly. For a long time, the man still didn't show any signs of letting go of him. Xinyu carefully glanced at him and asked, "Your Majesty?" "Yes?" Shang Junlin's expression was calm and his eyes were clear. Obviously, he was in a normal state. Xinyu secretly laughed at himself for overthinking. It was just an accidental touch. How could Shang Junlin lose his composure because of it? "Go in." "Okay." Xinyu was sent back to his room by Shang Junlin. The two stayed for a while before Shang Junlin left. Xinyu didn't take the accident to heart, but he didn't know how many waves were set off in Shang Junlin's heart at this moment. Shang Junlin went all the way back to the imperial study. Except for eunuch Ming, he dismissed all the servants. He couldn't focus on the official business that he usually handled easily. His mind was full of the soft touch on his chin. It was cold and soft. Shang Junlin couldn't help but reach out and touch the place where Xinyu touched. A trace of confusion flashed through his eyes. Why eunuch Ming stood aside and looked down. He didn't dare to make a sound to disturb the emperor who was in deep thought. Xinyu woke up from his afternoon nap and was shocked to see the man sitting by the bed. "Why didn't your majesty let someone call me?" Xinyu sat up with the quilt. "I saw that you were sleeping soundly, so I didn't call you." Shang Junlin also couldn't figure out why he suddenly came to Yuzhong Palace and sat beside Xinyu's bed for the whole afternoon. The man's expression remained the same. Xinyu didn't think much about it. He got up and put on his clothes. "How long has His Majesty been here?" Shang Junlin lied without batting an eyelid. "I just got here not long ago." Mu Shi, who had been tidying up Xinyu's outer robe for more than an hour, glanced at Shang Junlin in surprise when she heard what Shang Junlin said. When she met his gaze, she immediately looked away. Whatever His Majesty said, it would be as long as it took. Anyway, the one waiting was not her young master. She could not be bothered to care what the emperor thought. After tidying himself up, Xinyu followed Shang Junlin to the outer room. Mu Shi poured hot tea for them and left the room. Shang Junlin looked at Xinyu and didn't say anything. Xinyu said rascally, "Your Majesty, why did you come here at this hour? Is there something important?" Xinyu's work and rest schedule was very regular. He never made life difficult for himself. After entering the palace, he also followed his previous habits. Shang Junlin was the only master in the palace. Shang Junlin had no objection to this, so the others didn't dare to have any objections. Xinyu said that living in the palace was much more comfortable than living in Jinbeiho's residence. Shang Junlin knew his work and rest habits. Usually, he wouldn't come here during his rest time. Oh right. Most of the time, When he was taking a nap, Shang Junlin was still busy with official business. How come today? It's almost time for the palace banquet. If you have any questions, you can ask me. It's your first time dealing with this kind of thing. It's normal that you're not familiar with it. Is your Majesty worried about me? Shun Yu felt warm in his heart. If not, your Majesty asked at the right time. There are some things that I don't quite understand. Shin Yu said something that shouldn't be known to people who didn't live in the palace. Your Majesty, please enlighten me. Shang Junlin was in a good mood and answered one by one. Shin Yu thanked him with a smile. Shang Junlin was caught off guard by his smile. Your Majesty, this year shouldn't be the day when the vassal kings return to the capital. Why did your Majesty call them back? Shin Yu thought about this question for a few days, but he couldn't think of a reason. In his previous life, only the King of Yu returned to the capital. He found a reason to come back. Your Majesty has entered the palace. Naturally, you have to meet with the royal family. Shun Yu was stunned. He thought of all the possible plans that Shang Junlin might have, but he didn't think that the reason would be like this. TSK, I don't have a good relationship with the royal family. Your Majesty, you don't have to care too much about them. Just recognize them. When it came to these people who were supposed to be relatives and elders, Shang Junlin didn't have any feelings or respect. Shin Yu knew that Shang Junlin and the royal family didn't have a good relationship. He heard it from the King of Yu in his previous life. Shang Junlin was the only legitimate son of the Empress. He should have been appointed as the crown prince. He should have grown up smoothly and inherited the throne. Unfortunately, the late emperor wasn't clear-headed. He wanted to abolish the legitimate son and make way for the son of his favorite concubine. But in the end, Shang Junlin killed all the sons of the late emperor and his favorite concubine. He took the throne in a bloody way. The royal family had always been dissatisfied with this. In his previous life, the King of Yu took advantage of this to win over other royal families. He gave Shang Junlin a lot of trouble. Unfortunately, Shang Junlin was too strong. Their various actions in the early stage were like scratching an itch through a shoe. Only in the later stage did they really cause trouble for Shang Junlin. Who were the royal families? Shin Yu searched for a few names in his memory. It was a good opportunity to meet them at the palace banquet. The imperial edict asking the vassal kings to return to the capital had been sent to the fief of each of the vassal kings. There weren't many vassal kings left. Most of them were from the late emperor's generation. As for those who were of the same generation as Shang Junlin, most of them had been killed by him. The rest of them had to live with their tails between their legs and didn't dare to show their faces. When they received the imperial edict from the capital, Shang Junlin's brother's first reaction was fear. Was the emperor finally going to make a move on them? They were relieved when they learned that the emperor was only going back to attend the palace banquet. They didn't dare to delay. After receiving the imperial edict, they immediately ordered their subordinates to pack their luggage at the fastest speed and set foot on the road back to the capital. The King of Yu was the only one who was caught off guard by the emperor's news. He wanted to find an excuse to come to the capital, but he couldn't do it while he was still in the capital. The people who delivered the imperial edict were already on their way to his fief. The King of Yu had no choice but to put down what he was doing and rush back to his fief. He couldn't let the emperor know that he had secretly left his fief. Several fast horses died on the way back. He didn't rest for days and nights. Finally, he rushed back before the emperor's men entered his fief. He didn't have time to rest. After he cleaned up the traces of his departure, the people who delivered the imperial edict arrived. After receiving the imperial edict, the eunuch who delivered the imperial edict saw that the King of Yu didn't look well. He asked with concern, "Your Highness, are you feeling unwell?" "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine." The people behind the King of Yu passed a pouch to the eunuch who delivered the imperial edict. The eunuch calmly weighed the pouch and his expression became more amiable. He smiled and said, "Your Highness, please take care of yourself. I won't disturb your rest." After the people from the capital left, the King of Yu's legs went soft and he almost fell. The people behind him quickly supported him and said, "Your Highness." The King of Yu only felt that his vision turned black and he lost consciousness in the anxious voice of his subordinates. The King of Yu's residence was suddenly in a mess. The news was immediately passed to the hidden dragon guards who were mixed in with the imperial edict. Then, it was sent to Shang Junlin in an urgent and encrypted manner. The king of Yu didn't have time to rest. The emperor's imperial edict was so urgent that he had to leave for the capital immediately. Seeing Xinyu come over, Shang Junlin made room for him and complained half-truthfully, "Your Majesty really doesn't care about me anymore." "Your Majesty, what are you talking about?" Xinyu sat down unceremoniously and said sweet words, "Your Majesty will always be irreplaceable in my heart." "Your Majesty, take a look at this." Shang Junlin handed him a memorials. Xinyu took it and looked at it silently. Then he silently returned it and stared at Shang Junlin without saying a word. It was a memorials to persuade the emperor to take a concubine. "What does your Majesty think?" Shang Junlin's expression didn't change. "I have many of the same memorials here." Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.bq50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading Website, mbq50. CC. Chapter 15. The palace servants kneeled down. No one expected that Xingui Jun, who had always been gentle and good-tempered, would suddenly say such words. They didn't dare to look up at the emperor's face, but they had heard about the emperor's temper. Xingui Jun's words would definitely anger the emperor. What they couldn't figure out was why Xinyu wanted to dig his own grave. The emperor doted on him, but since ancient times, how could there only be one beauty in the emperor's harem? Xinyu not only showed his jealousy, but also used threats. Wasn't he cutting off his own path of retreat? Mushi's forehead was covered with a layer of fine sweat. She restrained the fear in her heart and looked up. Unfortunately, from her angle, she could only see her son's face and not the emperor's expression. In the oppressive silence, eunuch Ming carefully looked at the emperor's face. Suddenly, his heart jumped. The emperor didn't look angry. When he looked at Xinyu again, he still had a smile on his face. Only his pitch-black eyes gave off a bone-chilling coldness. Eunuch Ming couldn't understand the Duke of Zhenbei's son. The two protagonists, who were silently watched, didn't care about the palace servants' thoughts. Xinyu looked at the handsome emperor in front of him and said, "Your Majesty, do you really want to accept a new person into the harem? How can my noble emperor be so jealous?" Shang Junlin leaned close to Shen Yu's ear and said in a low voice with a hint of hint, "If your noble emperor can use practical actions to dispel my thoughts, I will do as you say." The two didn't seem to be talking about the expansion of the emperor's harem, but something insignificant. Xinyu lowered his eyes and glanced at the kneeling palace servants. His eyes lingered on a little eunuch for a while. When the eunuch realized something was wrong, he withdrew his eyes and said, "Your Majesty, do you really want to be here in front of these people?" Shang Junlin held Shun Yu's waist and put him on his lap. He casually glanced at Eunuch Ming and said, "Ming Chong, take them out." Eunuch Ming didn't dare to disobey. He bowed his head and took all the palace servants away. After the palace servants left, Xinyu loosened her grip on Shang Junlin's collar and wanted to get down from Shang Junlin's lap. Just as he moved, he felt the arm around his waist tighten. Xinyu looked at Shang Junlin in confusion. His gaze seemed to say, "She's gone. Shouldn't you let go of me now?" Unexpectedly, not only did Shang Junlin not let go of her, he even pulled her into his arms and asked meaningfully, "Gui Jun, what do you think? Is your Majesty dissatisfied with my performance just now?" Xinyu glared at him. Presumably, the whole capital will soon know that Shang Gui Jun, who just entered the palace, is not only jealous, but also threatened His Majesty not to accept new people into the palace. Imperial physician Gu said that it can help sleep. Is that true? She was skeptical. No matter how she looked at it, it was an ordinary grass, except that its color was more tender than ordinary grass. Since Imperial physician Gu sent it here, it must be effective. Xinyu looked at it for a while, then poured some water on it. Did you find out what happened to Imperial physician Gu? Imperial physician Gu's case involved the most sensitive topic at present. Whether it was Shen Yu or Imperial physician Gu himself, It was not convenient for them to talk about it to outsiders. Xinyu still did not know why Imperial Physician Gu was involved in the case, and even lost his life because of it in his previous life. This servant, she was about to answer when she was interrupted by a man who suddenly entered the door. Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.bq50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading Website, mbq50. CC. Chapter 16. It was not the first time that Shi was interrupted by the Emperor when he was talking to Xinyu. Compared to his initial fear, he was now much calmer. Eunuch Ming, who came in behind Shang Junlin, ordered the palace servants to put down the booklets and took the lead to retreat. The palace servants also retreated one by one. In the blink of an eye, only Xinyu and Shang Junlin were left in the room. Xinyu looked at the empty room and walked to Shang Junlin. He raised his head and asked, "Will your majesty tell me?" Shang Junlin looked at him calmly. "If your majesty asks, I will tell you." "Does your majesty really know?" Xinyu was stunned. He thought that Shang Junlin said it deliberately. Imperial Physician Gu was just an imperial physician. If he was not involved in Censor Zhang's case, Shang Junlin should not have spent so much effort to investigate him. Or was Imperial Physician Gu also involved in this matter in this life, but for some reason, he did not cause the same tragic consequences as in his previous life? The doubt in Shun Yu's eyes was too obvious. Shang Junlin frowned. "What is your majesty thinking?" "I'm wondering why your majesty pays special attention to Imperial Physician Gu," Xinyu blurted out. After he finished speaking, he realized that something was wrong and quickly remedied. "No, I'm just curious why your majesty knows so much about Imperial Physician Gu." Shen Yu's voice became fainter and fainter. Shang Junlin was so angry that he laughed. The inexplicable feeling in his heart just now was swept away. "Then why does your majesty think that I pay special attention to Imperial Physician Gu?" Shang Junlin emphasized the word special. "No matter what reason your majesty pays special attention to Imperial Physician Gu, if it's because of some other reason, your majesty should not think about it." Xinyu looked at Shang Junlin's eyes with a burning gaze. What other reason could there be? Shang Junlin was about to ask, but he heard Shan Yu's next words. "Your majesty promised me that no new people will enter the harem." Shang Junlin asked incredulously, "Why do you think I have such thoughts? Otherwise, why would your majesty pay attention to Imperial Physician Gu?" Xinyu calmly threw the question back. "What else could it be? Of course, it's because of you." Shang Junlin suddenly reacted. He stroked Shan Yu's neck and squeezed it with a sense of oppression. "Shin Guijun, you're quite bold. You're trying to trick me?" Xinyu didn't dodge. He lowered his eyes slightly and said, "I'm just a little worried. After all, I only have your majesty in this world." "Xinyu," Shang Junlin caressed the skin on Shan Yu's neck. Suddenly, he forcefully pinched Shan Yu's chin, forcing him to raise his head. "Don't play any tricks in front of me." "Why would your majesty think so?" Xinyu suddenly smiled. His eyes seemed to be full of light. "I'm your majesty's man now." He grabbed Xinyu's arm and pulled her into his arms. That person just happened to bump into Shang Junlin. The woman's eyes were covered with a white cloth. She grabbed Shang Junlin's clothes with one hand and pulled the white cloth off her face with the other. She said in a clear voice, "I caught you." The rest of her words were swallowed when she saw the scene in front of her. The woman quickly let go and knelt down. "Your Majesty, please forgive me. I didn't know it was your Majesty. I didn't mean to offend you." She used the opportunity of playing hide and seek to bump into the Emperor. There were too few opportunities to interact with the Emperor. She didn't want to let go of any opportunity. Whether it was for herself or for that person's request, she had to get along with Shang Junlin. After a long time, the woman didn't hear any sound. She carefully raised her head and saw that the Emperor didn't even look at her. He was gently tidying up Shan Yu's hair. When she looked at Shan Yu again, he was smiling and didn't seem angry. She immediately felt relieved. However, before she could breathe a sigh of relief, she saw the smiling Shin Guijun walk in front of her. Xinyu seemed to be in a difficult position. It was this hand that touched your majesty. I don't like it when others touch my things. How about this? If you touched it, you can leave it there. How about that? Genius 1 second. Remember this website. www.bq50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading Website. mbq50. CC. Now, there were so many people fawning over the emperor. The woman couldn't help but start to regret. If she had known that Xunyu was this crazy, she wouldn't have acted so rashly. Your Majesty is really popular. A slightly playful voice sounded. The women looked in the direction of the voice and saw Xunyu standing not far away, looking at them coldly. His heart skipped a beat. For some reason, an ominous premonition arose in his heart. Your Highness, come to my side. Shang Junlin's eyes darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. Xinyu walked over and stood beside the man. He tilted his head slightly. Your Majesty, who are these people? They are the imperial concubines of the previous emperor. So they are the imperial concubines of the previous emperor. Why are all of their eyes on your Majesty? Those who don't know would think that they are your Majesty's imperial concubines. The place where Xunyu was originally standing happened to be covered. These women were so focused on the emperor that they didn't notice that in addition to the emperor, Xunyu was also here. No one thought that Xunyu would directly expose their thoughts. Their faces turned red and white. Your Highness, this concubine is here to find Sister Ling. When one person spoke, the rest of the people seemed to have found their backbone and spoke one after another. Yes, we saw that Sister Ling didn't appear. We were worried about her, so... Xinyu listened quietly for a while, then raised his chin and said with a smile, "You're looking for that person?" Following Shan Yu's line of sight, they saw the pale-faced woman kneeling on the ground. I don't know what Sister Ling did wrong. It's nothing, Xinyu said lightly. It's just that when I saw her fall into your Majesty's arms, I wasn't in a good mood. The people who originally wanted to speak for the woman to show their kindness shut their mouths. If it was for other reasons, they could still plead for leniency. If it was really as Xinyu said, they would be stupid to plead for leniency. What are you doing? Didn't you hear what I just said? Xinyu was half leaning on Shang Junlin's body. His eyes were half closed, and his voice was full of displeasure. Several little eunuchs heard this and approached the woman kneeling on the ground. Regardless of the woman's struggle, they grabbed her arm. Your Majesty, your Highness, please spare my life. This concubine was insensible. This concubine didn't mean it. Please, your Highness, please spare my life. The strong smell of blood spread, and the blood on the ground swam. The woman fell down holding her arm. She was in so much pain that she couldn't speak. This is the result of coveting someone who shouldn't be coveting. A slightly cold voice sounded. The women couldn't help but tremble. After witnessing such a scene with their own eyes, they didn't dare to have any other thoughts. Xun Yu's meaningful gaze swept over the women who were as honest as quails. According to the rules of the palace, how should they be dealt with? According to the severity of the case, they should be imprisoned or given white silk and poisoned wine. Eunuch Ming replied, Your Majesty, please spare my life. Your Highness, please spare my life. Of course, they knew how serious the consequences of failure were. However, riches and honor came from danger. Compared to wasting their lives in the harem without any hope, they would rather take a gamble. And that person had said that as long as they could succeed, they could have glory, splendor, wealth, fame, and power in the future. They could have whatever they wanted. The only thing they didn't expect was that Xun Yu would make a move. In the face of life and death, how could they care about anything else? They just wanted to live. Xin Yu didn't really want to kill them. He deliberately pretended to be relaxed. The people who were begging for mercy saw hope. We beg your Highness to spare our lives. We promise that we will absolutely behave ourselves in the future. We won't come out to be an eyesore to your Highness. Xin Yu pondered for a moment, then take them to Yuzhong Palace. When I've vented my anger, maybe I'll let you go. Everyone quickly thanked him. After bringing them back to Yuzhong Palace, Xin Yu locked them up in different places. The people who had just been greatly frightened didn't dare to have any objections. They followed Shan Yu's arrangement. Lin Jilan was secretly taken away by Shang Junlin's people. Except for Shen Yu himself, no one else in Yuzhong Palace knew about it. As Shen Yu thought, the people behind the scenes didn't find anything wrong at all. There was a rumor that Shan Yu didn't allow Shang Junlin to take concubines. Those who got the news thought that Shan Yu brought them back to Yuzhong Palace to better torture them. Shen Yu was too lazy to care about what others thought. After handing them over to Shang Junlin, he no longer cared about this matter. Among the people who were brought back, Lin Jilan was not the only one who had problems. If they didn't receive someone's order, why would they want to get close to Shang Junlin? Mu Shi brought the medicine. Young master, it's time to take the medicine. Shen Yu brought it over and drank it in one gulp. Mu Shi handed over a handkerchief. Young master, Count Jinbei wants to see you. Why does he suddenly want to see me? Shen Yu remembered that he had asked Mu Shi to arrange people to go to Count Jinbei's mansion. What's the situation in Count Jinbei's mansion now? After this servant sent people there, concubine Ru, who originally had a better relationship with Count Jinbei, somehow angered Count Jinbei and was grounded. Shin Xingran's application was also changed back to the treatment of a concubine's son. Shin Yu didn't really expect to get an answer. He yawned and leaned toward the heat source. Genius 1 second. Remember this website. www.bq50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading URL. mbq50. CC. Shin Yu could accept to stay in the harem and cooperate with Shang Junlin mainly because of Shang Junlin's face. The more he looked at Shang Junlin's face, the more he felt that Shang Junlin's face suited his aesthetic. And Shang Junlin explained, "It is not convenient for me to leave the palace with my real identity." Shin Yu could understand. Although Censor Zhang's case was closed, there were still many suspicious points behind the scenes. In fact, there was no need for Shang Junlin to accompany him to the residence of Zhenbei at this time. The carriage drove out quietly from the side door. Shin Yu sat opposite Shang Junlin. "Your Majesty, there is no need to go to the residence of Zhenbei with me. Since I have promised you, how can I regret it?" Even in the not spacious carriage, Shang Junlin sat up straight. Although the carriage was not big, the decoration inside was very comfortable. Shin Yu sat on a thick blanket and hugged a heater in his hand, so he did not feel cold at all. The residents of Zhenbei had received the news that Shan Yu was coming back early in the morning. Everyone was prepared and waiting for Shan Yu's arrival. An inconspicuous carriage slowly approached. Jinbei Ho had received the news that Shen Yu's return this time was not to visit relatives, so there was no need to arrange a ceremonial carriage. Seeing that it was a small carriage, he did not dare to neglect it. After entering the courtyard, the carriage stopped. The first to get off was a tall man. Jinbei Ho was about to speak, but when he saw the man's face, he knelt down with a plop. Don't make it public?" Shang Junlin said coldly. "Yes." Jinbei Ho wiped the non-existent sweat on his forehead and stood up. His fear of Shang Junlin was deeply imprinted in his heart. Jinbei Ho had seen Shang Junlin's cruel side when he massacred the imperial court. Since then, his fear of Shang Junlin had never lessened. The curtain of the carriage was lifted, and a white hand stretched out from the carriage. Jinbei Ho widened his eyes and watched the emperor, who made him afraid, gently carry the young man out of the carriage. "Father, why don't you feel happy to see me?" Jinbei Ho, who was in a trance, looked at Shen Yu and then at Shang Junlin. He wondered if he was blind. His Majesty not only accompanied Shen Yu back to the residence, but also carried him out of the carriage. Hearing Shan Yu's voice, Jinbei Ho twitched the corner of his mouth. "I'm just too surprised." It was not that he had not heard the news about how his son was favored in the palace, but hearing it was not as impactful as seeing it with his own eyes. Jinbei Ho tried his best to calm down and led them to the hall. With Shang Junlin present, Jinbei Ho did not ask Shen Yu what he thought of the Ho Fu. The three of them chatted in the hall for a while. Alin, don't you agree? Alin. It was the first time that Shang Junlin heard Shin Yu call him so intimately. His heart trembled. He lowered his eyes and his long eyelashes covered his eyes. His voice was low and gentle. Yes, she should respect you. The intimate scene of the two people acting as if there was no one else around provoked Shen Qingran. He grabbed the quilt and sat up. Are you here to laugh at me? Taking advantage of His Majesty's favor, you do whatever you want. I want to see what will happen to you when His Majesty finds out what you have done and blames you. You don't have to worry about that. If I really angered His Majesty because of this, His Majesty will be furious. Everyone in the Duke Bey's mansion will suffer with me. Instead of worrying about me, you should worry about yourself. Shen Yu, you did it on purpose, didn't you? That's right. You see, either you help me hide it from His Majesty, or we'll all be punished together, so that I won't be alone. Shen Yu played with the man's fingers and said casually, don't you care about him? Shen Qingran was shocked by Shen Yu's attitude. He turned his head and looked at the man who was acting intimately with Shen Yu. You know that he is His Majesty's man. Why do you disregard your future and get involved with him? One Shang Junlin gave a short laugh and touched Shen Yu's feather-like long hair. He is still willing to be with me. I am already very satisfied. Aren't you afraid that your whole family will be punished because of him? Shen Qingran widened his eyes in disbelief. He couldn't believe that this man with an extraordinary temperament was actually a love-struck fool. As long as I can make him happy, I don't care what I do. Shang Junlin stared at the young man in front of him. His eyes were soft, as if he only had eyes for the young man. Shen Qingran was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Besides being shocked, he couldn't help but feel jealous. The person he liked didn't come to see him even once when he was sick. Even their messages were few and far between. Why could Shen Yu easily get the love of two outstanding men? Obviously, he was the one who had transmigrated. He should be the protagonist of this world. Are you envious of me? Oh, no. Are you jealous of me? Shen Yu approached him step by step. His voice was soft but cold. Are you feeling very indignant? Do you feel that I robbed you of the opportunity to enter the palace? Are you thinking that if you were the one who entered the palace, everything I have now would be yours? I didn't. Shen Qingran couldn't help but shrink back. He rarely confronted Shen Yu face to face. The only 2 times Shen Yu had scared him. No, that's what you think. Shen Yu pinched his chin and forced him to look at him. Your eyes tell me that you are jealous of my identity as the legitimate son. You are jealous of the men I met. You are jealous of me. Shut up. Shen Qingran awkwardly turned his head and pushed Shen Yu away. Shen Yu's words were like an axe that cut through his hard disguise, revealing his embarrassing inner self. The dirty and unbearable thoughts in his heart were exposed under the sun. Shen Yu took back his hand and stepped back. Shen Qingran, how can you be so rude to the noble prince? Quickly apologize. Jinbei Ho, who had rushed over after hearing the news, saw the scene before he entered the room. There's no need to apologize. Shen Yu walked to Shang Junlin's side, took the handkerchief from his hand and wiped his hand. What can he do to me lying there? Shen Qingran was angry, but he didn't dare to say anything. He didn't understand why his father, who had always doted on Shen Yu, was biased towards Shen Yu when it was obvious that it was Shen Yu who was in the wrong. Was it really like what Shen Yu said, that the entire Jinbei Ho fu was covering for Shen Yu? Jinbei Ho looked at Shang Junlin awkwardly. Shang Junlin had accompanied Shen Yu back to the fu with his identity concealed. Without his permission, Jinbei Ho didn't dare to reveal his identity. He could only ask, what happened? He said that I met my lover in private and ruined the family's reputation. Shen Yu began to count with his fingers. Sir Jinbei's vision darkened. His Majesty was still here. Shen Qingran was seeking death by saying such words. If His Majesty blamed the Lord Protector's mansion for this, no, he couldn't let such a thing happen. Jinbei Ho didn't know what happened before he came. Looking at the situation in the room, it didn't seem like there was an irreparable conflict. There should still be a chance to save the situation. He suppressed his anger and said, Noble Prince, Qingran is still young and has been spoiled by me. He speaks without thinking. It's time to teach him a lesson. Shang Junlin stroked Shen Yu's long hair, and said in a low voice. Jin Beiho didn't expect Shang Junlin to suddenly speak. He was stunned and looked at him carefully. However, Shang Junlin didn't even look at him. Jin Beiho couldn't tell what Shang Junlin's attitude was, so he could only agree. After watching enough, Shen Yu planned to leave. Before leaving, he looked back and smiled. Father, don't forget what you promised me before you left. Jin Beiho was shocked. He remembered that Shen Yu was talking about Shin Qingran and his mother. Now that Shen Yu was favored, he certainly couldn't offend his son. No matter how many thoughts he had, he could only suppress them. I won't forget. After Shen Yu left, Jin Beiho ignored the sad eyes of Shin Qingran and his mother. He learned what happened from the servant and left with a sullen face. Concubine Ru rushed over and grabbed the hem of his clothes. Master Ho ran or really didn't mean it. He was confused by anger. Shen Yu, no. Noble Prince brazenly took another man for a private meeting in the Zhenbei Ho Fu. He wanted to harm the whole Zhenbei Ho Fu. Duke Zhenbei kicked him away. Are you stupid? You believe everything he says. Why don't you think about it? The palace is heavily guarded, and he returned to the Marquis mansion temporarily. How can he have time to communicate with the lover you were talking about? That person is... Concubine Ru looked up in disbelief. Zhenbei Ho didn't have the patience to continue to argue with her, so he impatiently said, It's what you think. It's already that person's mercy that he didn't punish you. This concubine really didn't know. Concubine Ru's tone was absent-minded. You and your son should reflect on yourself here. In the future, without my order, you can't step out of the courtyard. Originally, because Shin Qingran was smart and knew how to please him, Jin Beiho didn't mind taking care of his son. But now, Shen Yu, who was favored by the emperor, was in front of him. He had to temporarily give up Shin Qingran. He had to find a way to find out His Majesty's attitude and whether this matter had a bad impression of the Zhenbei Ho Fu. If there was, Shin Qingran and his son couldn't be left alive. Jin Beiho didn't find a chance to sound out Shen Yu and Shang Junlin's words. Without a summons, he didn't dare to approach them directly. He waited and waited until he heard that the two of them had returned to the palace. He didn't know if it was because Shen Yu had stayed outside for too long, but he faintly showed signs of fever. After returning to the palace, Shang Junlin immediately called for the imperial physician. After Shen Yu drank a bowl of warm medicine, he finally relaxed. Take care of your own body. Shang Junlin frowned and looked at Shen Yu. When they were in the palace, Shen Yu didn't have many chances to catch a cold because he kept himself warm. He didn't expect that he would almost fall ill after leaving the palace for less than half a day. Shang Junlin realized for the first time how fragile Shen Yu's body was. Shen Yu smiled and moved closer to the man. He pressed down on his hand that was holding the pen to write the memorial. Don't we have His Majesty? I can't watch over you all the time. If your Majesty doesn't watch over me, who else would you watch over? Shen Yu sat on the small table where Shang Junlin put the memorial and looked down at Shang Junlin. What nonsense are you talking about? Who else would I watch over other than you? Shang Junlin picked up the long hair that fell in front of him. Are you happy today? Shen Yu tilted his head and smiled. Of course I'm happy when I'm with your Majesty. Although some things didn't work out, Shen Yu was really happy when he saw Shin Qingran and his mother's unlucky appearance. I don't think you're happy because I'm with you. Your Majesty saw through it but didn't say it out loud. Shen Yu's eyebrows curved. Then, are you happy today? If Eunuch Ming did not mention it, I would not know that His Majesty cares so much about me. Is there a problem with me caring about you? Shang Junlin's expression was magnanimous. No problem. Shen Yu originally wanted to tease him. Seeing that he did not take the bait, he did not continue. His Majesty should also care more about me in the future. If you can always be as obedient as you are now, I will naturally always care about you. Hearing Shang Junlin's words, Eunuch Ming's mouth could not help but twitch. If Shin Guijun was obedient, then there was no one in the world who was not obedient. Shang Junlin's birthday came in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Yu was dug out of the quilt by Shang Junlin, who had not yet left. Yu rubbed his eyes. Your Majesty? Didn't I tell you yesterday that you had to get up early today? Shang Junlin ignored Yu's struggle and wrapped him up with clothes. Yu muttered, Isn't it because your Majesty is too energetic and can cause too much trouble? Mu Shi, come and help your young master wash up. Without waiting for Yu to say anything more, Shang Junlin interrupted him. Last night, it was Yu who pulled him aside and talked about the national conditions of Dahuan for half the night. However, when it came from Yu's mouth, it seemed like something had happened. Looking at the servants around them, they all lowered their heads and could not hide their shyness. Eunuch Ming also had an expression that said, I understand. Your Majesty has worked hard. Shang Junlin opened his mouth and then closed it again. This kind of situation had happened more than once, and he could not explain it every time. Shang Junlin had already tidied himself up and stood aside to wait for Yu to wash up. After washing his face, Yu was finally completely awake. He looked around and saw that the servants around him glanced at him from time to time with obvious joy on their faces. Especially Eunuch Ming and Mu Shi, they were gratified but also distressed. Yu touched his nose inexplicably. He walked to Shang Junlin's side, pulled on his sleeve, and asked in a low voice, What's wrong with him? Shang Junlin looked back. Under his gaze, the servants all lowered their heads and did not dare to show the slightest expression. Don't you remember what you said? Shang Junlin lowered his head and looked at him. Yu carefully thought back and suddenly remembered what he said in front of the servants when he was unconscious. He lowered his head little by little. Does your Majesty have nothing to say to me? I spoke carelessly. Your Majesty is a magnanimous person. Don't fuss over such a small matter with me. Yu's voice became lower and lower. If your Majesty cares, I'll go and say it. I'm too good at tormenting people. No need. Shang Junlin rubbed between his eyebrows. Go and change your clothes. Of course, they are still locked up in Yuzhong Palace. If Xin Guizhuan's anger doesn't subside, she probably won't let them go. His Majesty is too. Some people couldn't stand it. In any case, they are the former emperor's people. Some people stood on Shan Yu's side. If they didn't have the idea first and were caught red-handed, Xin Guizhun wouldn't be angry with them. The people who were talking about it didn't notice that not far from them, the man quietly crushed the cup in his hand. Your Majesty, Shun Guizhun has arrived. The hall suddenly quieted down. Shang Junlin took Xin Yu to the high seat, and the ministers saluted. For many people, this was the first time they saw Shun Yu's appearance. At the moment when they saw her, some people found a reason for Shang Junlin's abnormal behavior. Such a beauty, if it were them, they would also be willing to treat her like a treasure. Xin Yu's beauty was flamboyant and gorgeous, like a flower in full bloom, which could be seen but not touched. Everyone, please rise. Shang Junlin held Shan Yu's hand, walked all the way to the place where Shun Yu should sit, and came to the highest place. Xin Yu raised her eyebrows in surprise, poked the man's arm, and asked in a low voice, Your Majesty? The ministers who got up also saw this scene, and they looked at each other and frowned. Sitting with me? Are you afraid? Shang Junlin looked down at the young man beside him, and his eyes were obscure. Reason told him that he should let Xin Yu sit in the place where he should sit, but when he passed by that place, he didn't let go, but led the young man to the highest place. I'm not afraid. Xin Yu tugged at the man's clothes. As long as your Majesty doesn't mind me taking up space. Shang Junlin hooked up the corner of his mouth, and a faint smile appeared in his eyes. Seeing that Shan Yu was going to sit next to Shang Junlin, some ministers couldn't sit still. Your Majesty, this is inappropriate. Oh? Then tell me, what's inappropriate about it? The smile in his eyes instantly disappeared, and the young emperor looked down at the minister who spoke. His expression was indiscernible. Obviously, it was just a very calm sentence, but the minister who was kneeling on the ground was frightened and sweated. He knew that he had angered his Majesty, but some rules must not be abolished. Gritting his teeth, He made up his mind and said, "Your Majesty, it's inappropriate for Guijun to sit next to Your Majesty." Once the first sentence came out, the rest of the words were easy to say. Since ancient times, only the Empress, as the head of the harem, can stand next to Your Majesty. No matter how much Your Majesty favors Guijun, he is not the Empress, he can't. Feeling more and more oppressive, he gritted his teeth and said the last sentence. He can't have the same treatment as the Empress. Shang Junlin's black eyes sank, ignoring the minister's words, and sat down with Shun Yu. Your Majesty, according to Kong Daren's opinion, should I confer Guijun as the Empress today? Shang Junlin stroked Shun Yu's wrist and said with a cold tone. Kong Daren never thought that the Emperor would rather confer Shin Yu as the Empress than let Shin Yu return to where he should be. The ministers and vassals who were watching were also surprised. For the first time, they felt that the rumor about how much the Emperor doted on Shin Guijun was not a rumor. No one dared to stand up when the Emperor was angry. If it was something else, they could argue. But this was related to Shan Guijun. Who knows if the Emperor would directly confer her as the Empress if they stood up. Seeing that no one spoke for him, Kong Daren pointed his spear at Shin Yu. Guijun, since you have entered the palace, you should scrupulously abide by your duty, be magnanimous and virtuous, and persuade His Majesty to have more children. Feeling that Shang Junlin's cold aura was getting stronger and stronger, Shin Yu knew that Kong Daren had really angered Shang Junlin this time. Shin Yu pressed the back of Shang Junlin's hand and signaled him not to speak. He stood up from Shang Junlin's arms and looked at Kong Daren condescendingly. Does Kong Daren live by the sea? Why do you care so much? Shin Yu slightly lowered his eyes and said with a somewhat careless tone. Kong Daren's face turned red. You, Kong Daren, did you make a mistake? Shin Yu was too lazy to listen to his words and interrupted. This world is His Majesty's world. Kong Daren, as the imperial censor, it is your duty to persuade His Majesty, but it depends on what you are persuading. I also want to ask Kong Daren, where I sit, does it have anything to do with the state affairs? Kong Daren couldn't answer. Of course, he knew that it didn't matter. He was just using this as a pretext to make a fuss. As for the issue of having children, you should all know my attitude. I can't tolerate sand in my eyes, and I am also very domineering. Since His Majesty has me, he can't have anyone else. You are simply unreasonable. Seeing that Shan Yu was stubborn, the man turned to Duke Bei and said, Duke Bei, is this the good son you taught? One Duke Bei, who had already experienced Shun Yu's power, didn't want to talk to him at all. Your Majesty, Shin Guijun has only been in the palace for a few days, but he is already so lawless. You can't let him do everything. In the future, maybe. Shin Yu narrowed his eyes and looked at the middle-aged man who was panting heavily. This man was Shang Junlin's uncle. Because he had contributed a little to Shang Junlin's ascension to the throne, he had always boasted that he had contributed to the ascension of the emperor and was the most capable person in the royal family. If Shin Yu remembered correctly, this man had an unmarried niece who was a popular candidate to be the empress. No wonder he couldn't sit still after hearing Shang Junlin's words. Princely, be careful with your words. Shang Junlin lightly interrupted Princely. He stood up and put one arm around Shan Yu's waist. His black eyes looked down emotionlessly. Guijun is my man. How I pamper him is my business. It has nothing to do with you. Do you understand? Shin Yu leaned into the man's arms, the corners of her mouth slightly raised. But the words she said sent chills down one's spine. Genius 1 second. Remember this website. www.bq50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading Website. MBQ50. CC. Chapter 22. Too arrogant. That was everyone's first thought. No one expected that Shan Yu would say such a thing in public. If he said it to the emperor in private, it could barely be considered a joke. But now, no one dared to treat Shin Yu's words as a joke. Guijun is joking. His Majesty is the emperor of a country. How can there only be one man in the harem? The speaker deliberately emphasized the word man. He was reminding Shin Yu that he was just a man and couldn't bear the glory of monopolizing the emperor's favor. Daren, No matter how much you say, you can't ignore His Majesty's wishes, right? In the end, this is His Majesty's private matter. His Majesty can do whatever he wants. If I said that you should dismiss all your wives and concubines at home and give you a few that you don't like, you wouldn't be happy, right? You are twisting words and forcing logic. His Majesty is the emperor of a country. How can he be compared to us? The emperor of a country is a person. You are also a person. If you don't want to give people to you, how can His Majesty be happy? Xinyu nestled in Shang Junlin's arms and felt the man's chest tremble. Her hand was also held by the man. Guijun is right. My private matter doesn't need to trouble my beloved ministers. Everyone could hear the joy in Shang Junlin's words. A crisis had been resolved. It was reasonable to say that the ministers should be happy, but the development of the situation didn't make them happy. The emperor favored only one person. For them, it wasn't a good thing. Some people began to secretly regret. If they had known that His Majesty wasn't tempted, they wouldn't have encouraged the son of Zhenbei, Ho, to enter the palace. Or, they should have recommended their children to enter the palace from the beginning. Compared to the endless glory and wealth, what was a little bit of danger? After that, during the palace banquet, no one dared to say anything about Xinyu. The emperor's attitude was very clear. If they continued to talk about this matter, they didn't know how to appreciate favors. After a short period of low pressure, the palace banquet became lively again. Graceful dancers walked over with graceful steps, dancing gracefully to the moving music. Their gauze fluttered with their movements, creating an extreme visual feast. The dancers raised in the palace are indeed different. Xunyu poked the meat in the bowl and sighed. You like it? Shang Junlin asked in an ambiguous tone. Xunyu was keenly aware of Shang Junlin's displeasure. Although he did not know the reason, he still answered cautiously, That's not true. Compared to them, I still prefer your Majesty. Shang Junlin was in a better mood and returned the favor. I also like you more. Seeing that the human pressure around him had returned to normal, Xunyu continued to enjoy the song and dance. He had a lot of patience for beautiful things. When he first approached Xinyu's attitude had always been very cold. She did not treat him any differently from others. But now, she smiled sweetly in front of Shang Junlin. Her every move was so dazzling that people could not take their eyes off her. So, was he really just a substitute that Xinyu used to comfort her when she was bored? If it were not for the fact that conditions did not allow him to do so, he really wanted to ask her in person. In what way was he inferior to Shang Junlin? Why was he the substitute of the most annoying person? Unfortunately, since that meeting, he had never found a chance to see Xinyu again. He used the previous method to send Xinyu letters and asked people to send things to Xinyu. Except for the things that were returned intact, the letters that he sent were like a stone that sank into the sea. There was no reply at all. Later on, he encountered all kinds of troubles. He could not even take care of himself, let alone find a chance to see Xinyu, who had already entered the palace. He wanted to let the spies in the palace pass a message to Xinyu, but Shang Junlin watched him too closely. Yuzhong Palace was heavily guarded. Once his people appeared, they would be arrested. Before his great cause was accomplished, he absolutely could not expose himself at this time. Why does the Prince of Yu seem to be in a bad mood? Princely finished a cup of wine and noticed the ugly expression on the Prince of Yu's face. He followed his line of sight and rolled his eyes. Isn't Princely the same? The Prince of Yu's attitude towards Princely, who had already sided with Shang Junlin, was not very good. This prince is in a bad mood because my calculations have failed. What about Prince Yu? Princely did not mind exposing his scars. As far as this prince knows, Your Highness Prince Yu does not have much of a grudge with the two above. You don't need to worry about this prince's matters. The Prince of Yu took a sip of wine. Under the influence of alcohol, his attitude became even worse. Princely should worry more about himself. Because of your own calculations, you have angered Shun Guijun, who is favored by the emperor. Don't lose the emperor's heart because of this. Shun Guijun, Prince Li's voice was heavy. If I had known that he was such a powerful character, I would not have let him enter the palace in the first place. Didn't our good emperor personally choose him to enter the palace? The Prince of Yu keenly sensed something and deliberately asked, does he really think that he was chosen by the heavens? If no one did anything behind his back, the one entering the palace could have been Madame Zhang. Madame Wang did not have to be Madame Chan. Princely explained meaningfully. The Prince of Yu's eyes darkened. As expected. Originally, I only wanted to find a pathfinder. Who would have thought that he would become a roadblock? The Prince of Yu poured himself a cup of wine. The affairs of the world are truly unpredictable. Did you not investigate what kind of person you were sending into the palace before deciding on the candidate? The Prince of Yu couldn't help but ask. What's the use of saying this now? The Prince of Yu raised his wine cup and clinked it with the Prince of Yu's. What we need to consider now is how to remove this roadblock. Aren't you just shooting yourself in the foot by doing this? The Prince of Yu's tone became even more unfriendly when he thought of Shen Yu and the fact that he had been used as a substitute. Why does your Highness Prince of Yu have to poke at this prince? The one who angered you is not this prince. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. The Prince of Yu drained the wine in his cup in one gulp and slowly revealed his true motive. Your Highness Prince of Yu, why don't you come to Huateng residence for a chat after the palace banquet? The Prince of Yu gripped the cup in his hand tightly. After a moment of silence, he said, okay. The Prince of Yu returned to his seat in satisfaction. The two of them sat close to each other, so their short exchange did not attract much attention. Shen Yu had been paying a portion of his attention to the Prince of Yu, so he had a panoramic view of the Prince of Yu and Prince Li's actions. He absent-mindedly withdrew his gaze and poured himself a cup of wine. Before he could put it into his mouth, the hand holding the cup was held by Shang Junlin. Your Majesty? Shen Yu was at a loss. Imperial physician Gu said that it's best if you don't touch wine. His large palm wrapped around Shen Yu's fingers. Shang Junlin leaned forward slightly and drank the wine in his cup in one gulp. That's my cup, Shen Yu said quietly. Genius 1 second. Remember this website. www.bq50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading Website. mbq50. CC. Chapter 23. Your Majesty is my husband. How could I dislike your Majesty? As long as your Majesty doesn't dislike me, it's fine. Shen Yu looked away and lowered his voice. Surrounded by musical instruments, Shen Yu's voice entered Shang Junlin's ears without being affected. You must be joking. Husband and wife are one. I dislike anyone but you. Shang Junlin slightly curved his lips. The man's hand was big and warm. Shen Yu's hand was completely wrapped in his palm. Shen Yu could feel a steady stream of heat coming from their skin. The palm of his hand was cold, and the back of his hand was hot. A strange feeling spread from his hand to the bottom of his heart. Shen Yu's fingers moved. He wanted Shang Junlin to let go of him. Unexpectedly, not only did the man not let go, but he also increased the strength of his grip. Your Majesty, you should let go of my hand. After maintaining the original position for a while, Shen Yu saw that Shang Junlin still had no intention of letting go, so he had to remind him. Shang Junlin seemed to have woken up from a dream and let go of his hand. Shen Yu immediately took his hand back. His palm was empty, and his heart also seemed to be empty. Shen Yu still felt the man's warmth on the back of his hand. He retracted his hand into his wide sleeves and unconsciously curled his fingers. Shen Yu didn't have a big appetite. After eating a little, he felt full. He stared at the jade-colored wine pot on the small table and licked his lips. The wine was brewed in the palace for a long time. It was mellow and fragrant. The fragrance of the wine seemed to have a long hook, hooking Shen Yu's sense of smell. People were always like this. The more they were not allowed to touch something, the more they wanted to touch it. Shen Yu was obsessed with wine in his previous life. It was not because he drank too much, but because the cold illness in his body could only be alleviated after drinking. It would not make him feel like he was living in an ice cellar. In this life, his physical condition was not as bad as it was in his previous life, and Shang Junlin had instructed him not to let wine appear in his sight, so he did not miss it. But today, the aroma of the wine had suddenly aroused his appetite, and he wanted to taste it even more. Your Majesty, Xinyu pulled the man's sleeve and said, "Let me have a taste. I promise I'll only take a sip." "How come we didn't know that your highness was such a glutton?" Shang Junlin raised his eyebrows and looked at the young man. He remembered that according to the news from the hidden dragon guards, Shan Yu did not drink at all. "I just want to have a taste. Who asked this wine to be so fragrant?" Shin Yu perfectly explained what it meant to be strong, even though he was not in the right. "You are clearly the one who is greedy, yet you are blaming the wine." Shang Junlin shook his head with a smile. "It is not that Jian does not allow you to drink, but Imperial Physician Gu said that your body is not suitable for drinking. I drank when I first entered the palace." Under Shang Junlin's deep gaze, Shun Yu's voice became lower and lower. "Why did you stop talking? It seems that your highness did not forget what happened that night." Shun Yu indeed remembered. That day was the first time he had a relapse after his rebirth. He always thought that it was a coincidence, but it turned out that there was another reason. Was my relapse because I drank wine? Shun Yu hesitated. Yes and no. The wine was just a trigger. Shang Junlin was unwilling to elaborate, and Shun Yu did not want to force him. He could only reluctantly look away and continue to focus on the singing and dancing. Other than the unhappiness at the beginning, the overall atmosphere of the banquet was very good. It was just that some segments were very boring. Towards the end, Shun Yu was a little tired. "Your Majesty, I want to go out for a walk." Shang Junlin knew that he was bored and did not stop him. "Go, don't stay outside for too long." In order to not attract attention, Shin Yu only took Mu Shi with him when he left. The palace banquet was getting lively. Other than a few people who had been paying attention to Shin Yu, the others did not notice that Shan Yu had quietly left. King Yu was one of them. Seeing this, he found an excuse and followed him out. Seeing this, Prince Li stroked his beard with a smile in his eyes. He knew that something must have happened between King Yu and Shen Guijun. Otherwise, why would Shen Guijun look at him with such a betrayed expression? He waved his hand to summon a servant and ordered in a low voice, "Follow King Yu and report everything to me. Be careful, don't be discovered." Yes. The servant accepted the order and left. The young emperor who was sitting on the high seat saw this scene and his eyes darkened. He knocked on the table with his knuckles and ordered, "Meng Chong, let the hidden dragon guards follow his highness." Eunuch Meng was surprised. Seeing his majesty's cold expression, he swallowed his questions and said, "Yes." Shin Yu did not know that King Yu had followed him out and that King Li's men were following him. He did not go far and found a place to hide from the wind. "Mu Shi, what else happened on the day I fainted?" Mu Shi's expression changed slightly. "Young master, I'm not sure." Eunuch Meng handled everything that happened that day. "I only know that young master, because..." Mu Shi could not continue. "Because of what?" Shang Junlin did not mention what happened that day. Shin Yu thought that he had only fainted, but now it seemed that this was not the case. Because he was thinking about something, Shin Yu did not notice Mu Shi's strange expression. "Because young master could not stand your majesty and fainted." After saying it in one breath, Mu Shi's face turned red. Cough, cough, cough. Hearing this reason, Shin Yu choked on his own saliva. "Is young master okay?" Mu Shi did not have time to blush. She quickly stepped forward. Her Majesty knows that young master's health is not good, but she still went overboard. "Stop." Shin Yu felt that if he did not interrupt, Mu Shi would say many more surprising things. What else? Think carefully. What other unusual things happened? If you want to talk about unusual things, does Her Majesty change most of the servants in Yuzhong Palace the next day count? Mu Shi could only think of this. Most of the palace servants were changed? It seemed that something did happen that night that he did not know, but he did not know if it had anything to do with his sudden illness. It's normal that young master does not remember. Most of the people in that group have never shown their faces in front of young master. "I only found out later," Mu Shi explained. "No wonder I didn't find anything wrong," Shin Yu muttered. "In fact, I think that Her Majesty is very good to young master, except that she doesn't know how to restrain herself." Mu Shi clearly saw how Shang Junlin treated Shin Yu. Even if she was biased against Shang Junlin at the beginning, she had to admit that Shang Junlin was the person who treated her young master the best. Her Majesty is indeed. Xinyu suddenly turned his head. Who? One prince Yu walked out of the dark with a dark face, holding a withered branch in his hand. It was the sound of breaking the branch that made Xinyu find him. Your Highness. Mushi took a step back and saluted. Why did your Highness come out? Xinyu looked at Prince Yu as if he was a stranger, which made Prince Yu extremely angry. Especially after hearing the conversation between the two, the anger in his heart had long been surging. He was clearly the one who met Xinyu first, and he was the one who discovered Xinyu, this pearl. So why didn't he get anything, and even let the person he hated the most take advantage of him? At that time, when he caught a glimpse of her in the corridor, her jade-like face was deeply imprinted in his heart. If he didn't have a very good impression of her from the beginning, why would he, a dignified prince, lower himself to make friends with her personally? When he quietly followed her out, Prince Yu himself didn't know what he was thinking. He used a disguised identity to make friends with Xinyu. Now he was Prince Yu, and Xinyu didn't know him at all. He couldn't do anything even if he followed her out. It was undeniable that Prince Yu had a trace of expectation in his heart that he was unwilling to admit. He hoped that Xinyu could recognize him, but he was also afraid that Xinyu could recognize him. With unclear thoughts, he followed them all the way until he heard the conversation between Xinyu and Mushi. He could no longer keep calm. The person he had never touched before was not only taken by someone else, but also injured by that person's impetuousness. For a moment, Prince Yu didn't even understand whether he was angry that Xinyu, who he regarded as his possession, was touched by someone else, or that Xinyu was injured by that person. In anger, he broke the dead branch beside him. After being discovered by Xinyu, he didn't intend to continue hiding and directly walked out. Shun Guijun is really in a good mood. Prince Yu stared at Xinyu's face and saw the indifference on his face. The anger in his heart burned more and more. Why? Why can Xinyu live with Shang Junlin with a clear conscience as if nothing happened? Why is he the only one who remembers that relationship? Xinyu didn't feel Prince Yu's anger, but so what? He abandoned the trash in his previous life. Did he have to pick it up again in this life? He didn't have this hobby. Those who make him unhappy, he will definitely return it 1,000 times. Xinyu, you are really good. Prince Yu took a few steps forward, but Mushi stopped in front of Xinyu and said sternly, "This is the Imperial Palace. Your Royal Highness, please respect yourself." Xinyu put one hand on Mushi's arm and pushed her away. We don't know each other. Why do you say that? Don't know each other? Prince Yu's face was gloomy. Xinyu, young Master Shun, do we really not know each other? Prince Yu is joking. Xinyu shook his head lightly. Among the people I know, there is no Prince Yu. What about Zhao Yu? Prince Yu stared at Shun Yu's face, trying to see a trace of panic on his face. Unfortunately, Prince Yu was destined to be disappointed. Hearing this name, Xin Yu's face didn't change. I knew him before I entered the Imperial Palace. Why? Just know each other? Prince Yu's eyes were gloomy. Guijun, tell me, if I tell His Majesty that you have privately promised to marry someone before you entered the Imperial Palace, will he still dote on you like he does now? Prince Yu seems to be very concerned about my affairs. Is it because you also like me? Xin Yu stopped Mushi, who wanted to speak, and asked casually. Prince Yu's chest was filled with depression. Although he didn't want to admit it, to some extent, Xin Yu did say what he was thinking. Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.bq50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading URL, mbq50. CC. Chapter 24. How could King Yu, who had just been provoked by this matter, hear these words? The veins on his forehead bulged, and he almost used up all his patience to prevent himself from losing his composure. You weren't like this before. King Yu was so angry that he lost all reason. He blurted out his thoughts. Are you still blaming this king for not protecting you and causing you to enter the palace? Wait. Xin Yu interrupted King Yu's words. He thought, King Yu's tolerance is not good. With just a few words, he revealed all his secrets. In his previous life, King Yu was not so honest in front of him. It was he who guessed King Yu's true identity through clues. Why did he say it so quickly in this life? Was the impact of him entering the palace so big? All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind, but he didn't show it on his face. He pretended to be puzzled and asked, "What does King Yu mean? Why don't I remember having contact with King Yu before entering the palace? What does it have to do with His Royal Highness whether I enter the palace or not?" A series of questions were thrown at King Yu. King Yu's mind, which was occupied by anger, finally sobered up. When he realized what he had said, his face turned ugly. This king, or did King Yu conceal his identity and contact me? Let me guess, King Yu mentioned Zhao Yu just now. Is it possible that His Royal Highness is Zhao Yu? Shin Yu stood on the steps with his arms crossed and looked down at the man in the prince's attire. King Yu didn't expect that Shun Yu could guess the truth with just a few words. He flatly denied, "This king is not." Then is young Master Wang, young Master Lin, or young Master Su? When a name was read out, King Yu's face darkened. He thought that he was a substitute was the limit of his tolerance. He never thought that he might be a substitute. One of the substitutes? Shin Yu pretended to be distressed. There are a lot of people. How about His Royal Highness tell me directly? Which one are you? Shin Yu, don't go too far. I'm going too far? Who eavesdropped on my conversation with the maid? Who was the one who followed me out? Who deliberately concealed his identity and approached me? Your Highness Prince Yu, I also want to know what you want to do. Shin Yu's face turned cold. This prince is only here to remind you. Don't think that just because you have the Emperor's favor, you can do whatever you want in the palace. There are many people eyeing the position of Empress. If you show off like this, you will only become a thorn in their side. They will only want to get rid of you as soon as possible. King Yu took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. You don't have to worry about that. I believe that His Majesty will protect me. After all, His Majesty is not like some people who say that it has to be you, but in the blink of an eye, they can turn a blind eye to that person's predicament and desperately try to make their presence known. Shin Yu walked down the steps and approached Yu Wang step by step. Yu Wang, are you still blaming me? Are you still blaming me for not finding a way to not enter the palace because of you? This king did not. Yu Wang's tone unconsciously lowered. When he first heard the news, that was indeed what he thought. Shin Yu's words were like a gust of wind that blew away his self-deceiving disguise and revealed his selfishness. Shin Yu stepped back slightly and brushed past Yu Wang without any reluctance. Now I really feel that entering the palace was the best choice I have ever made. No matter what identity you used to approach me, there was no connection between us in the past, and there will be no connection in the future. There was only the hatred of 2 lifetimes apart. After the people who secretly followed Yu Wang returned, they reported everything that happened here to Princely in full detail. Princely stroked his beard. I didn't expect that our Shen Guijun had such a relationship with Yu Wang. Your Highness, should we? With such a big handle, we must grasp it well. Shin Yu, isn't Shen Guijun very arrogant? This king wants to see if His Majesty can still treat him as before after this incident. Yu Wang smiled in a good mood. He didn't expect to find such a big surprise by secretly following Yu Wang. He was just worrying about how to deal with Shun Yu, and the solution came to him. It seemed that even God was on his side. Send someone to investigate. Investigate carefully. This king wants to know all the details of what happened to Shun Yu before he entered the palace. On the second day of the palace banquet, several people who were disrespectful to Shun Yu at the palace banquet were dismissed. The ministers who had a premonition about this were used to it. His Majesty was already merciful by only dismissing them and not beheading them. In addition, these people's official positions were not high, and their conduct was not completely impeccable. Their disappearance from the court did not cause much of a stir. It was getting closer to the end of the year. Shang Junlin was not as busy as before, and the time he spent in Yuzhong Palace increased day by day. Because it was almost the new year, Shang Junlin simply ordered the vassal kings to spend the new year in the capital before leaving. Your Highness, do you know why His Majesty did not let us go back? In the private room, Princely took a sip of wine. Does Imperial Uncle know? Yu Wang really couldn't figure it out. Recently, he had been in a terrible fix because of Shan Qingran's matter, and really had no time to care about other things. I can guess a little. I'm afraid that some people's hearts are too big, and His Majesty wants to use this opportunity to knock some sense into them. Princely looked at Yu Wang meaningfully as he spoke. Yu Wang's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't show it on his face. Your nephew really doesn't know. Recently, your nephew has been busy with some personal matters and has no time to care about other things. Princely smiled and didn't expose him, but his next sentence almost made Yu Wang jump out of his seat. Imperial nephew, have you considered how to deal with your relationship with Shen Guijun? Now that His Majesty dotes on Shen Guijun so much, if he knew that you had an ambiguous relationship before Shen Guijun entered the palace, wouldn't it? Princely didn't finish his sentence, but Yu Wang knew what he meant. The matter between him and Shun Yu could be big or small. If it was used by someone with ulterior motives, all his years of planning would be ruined. Imperial uncle must be joking. This prince and Shun Guijun don't know each other. How could we have such a relationship? Yu Wang doesn't need to rush to refute. Since this prince dared to speak, I naturally have evidence. Now, you and I have the same goal. Is Yu Wang willing to watch your former lover be in love with someone else for the rest of your life? Princely didn't expect that his subordinate would be able to find out such interesting things. It turned out that Yu Wang had secretly come to the capital and even concealed his identity to be on good terms with the legitimate son of Count North. Your Highness, why don't you and I work together? What I want is the position of Empress. If you still want Shen Yu, after this matter is done, you can bring him back to your fief. Yu Wang knew that since Princely dared to say it directly, he must know something. But some things were different from the person himself admitting it. After a moment of silence, Yu Wang said, "We can work together, but I hope Imperial Uncle understands that the one who has feelings for Shan Yu is Zhao Yu. It has nothing to do with this prince." Princely smiled. "This prince understands. Your Highness has always stayed in your fief and never left before the Imperial Edict arrived." A toast to Imperial Uncle. Yu Wang raised his wine cup and drank it in one gulp. Imperial nephew, if you have any problems, feel free to look for this prince. As long as this prince can help, this prince will definitely not refuse. Yu Wang's hand tightened around the wine cup. Shen Yu. He couldn't stand the sight of Shen Yu staying by Shang Junlin's side. Whenever he thought of it, it was like a ball of fire was burning in his heart. Achoo. Young master, rest early. It's already very late. Mushi brought in hot water. Shen Yu put down the pin in his hand and soaked his hand in the hot water. When he felt his body temperature return, he took it out. I'm fine. Young master, will Yu Wang really be fine? Knowing that Zhao Yu was the empress of Yu, Mushi had been worried. If Yu Wang spread rumors about what happened back then, would Her Majesty believe her young master? Since ancient times, there were only a few things that men couldn't tolerate the most. Moreover, Her Majesty was the emperor, so she would only be more intolerable. Do you think he will be stupid enough to perish together with me? She shook her head. She was just afraid that Yu Wang would be too angry with her young master and expose the matter directly. Besides, there's nothing between me and him. Even if he wants to do something, he won't be able to do it. Shen Yu expected that Yu Wang would not let it go, but he didn't expect it to be in this way. Looking at the men in front of him, Shen Yu stopped in his tracks. What are the two princes doing? Seeing that the weather was good, Shen Yu went out of Yuzhong Palace for a walk and planned to send the late birthday gift to Shang Junlin. He didn't expect to run into Yu Wang and Li Wang. We came specially to find your highness. Can we talk in private? Yu Wang was silent and didn't speak. Li Wang spoke in a seemingly amiable manner. Shen Yu didn't think that they came to find him for anything good, so he didn't want to waste time. If you have something to say, just say it. Then this prince will get straight to the point. Li Wang narrowed his eyes and said slightly threateningly, "This prince already knows what happened before your highness entered the palace. If your highness doesn't want this matter to be known to everyone, it's best that you find a way to persuade his majesty to agree to take a consort." I was wondering what it was. So it's this. Li Wang is really interesting. Why do you think I'll be threatened by you? Shun Yu raised his eyebrows. If it's just for this matter, Li Wang shouldn't waste our time. Does your highness think that his majesty won't care about this matter? Li Wang couldn't stand Shan Yu's fearless appearance. His tone was vicious. For the time being, we can say that it happened before you entered the palace, so His Majesty can't delve into it. What if this prince says that this prince also knows that after Your Highness entered the palace, Your Highness secretly left the palace to meet with an old lover? Shun Yu's expression became a little subtle. Li Wang thought that he had stepped on Shun Yu's sore spot, and the corners of his mouth rose. This prince also doesn't want to publicize this scandal to everyone. As long as Your Highness does as this prince says, this prince guarantees that no one else will mention this matter of Your Highness meeting with someone else. Your Highness should think carefully before answering. Think about what? Shang Junlin's low voice came from the other side. The person who met Your Highness that day was Zhen. What? Does Li Wang have an opinion about this? This official doesn't dare. The smile on Li Wang's face froze. Genius 1 second. Remember this website. www.bq50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading Website. MBQ50. CC. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.